Good morning. My name is Jonathan Lackritz. I'm a program manager for the BEAD program at the California Public Utilities Commission. Today, we are hosting the first in a series of office hours. This will be an opportunity for participants in the BEAD process to ask their questions and for us to answer them. Next slide, please. And the next slide after that. Thank you. So our agenda. We're doing the welcome. We'll do some housekeeping about how to ask questions, and then we will engage in questions and answers, and then we'll close out with next steps and reminders. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, this is an opportunity for you to ask questions about the challenge process and the BEAD program in general. Keep in mind that we may not have all the answers today, as the BEAD program is developing constantly and is dependent on a number of factors. To that end, we are recording today's office hours, and we will be adding answers to our FAQs on our website to the questions asked today and that we have previously received through our email inbox and also asked at previous webinars. We are required to follow the rules of the NTIA, which administers the program. Next slide, please. So, format of the office hours. So we're going to ask that you, to ask a question, that you write your question in the chat and wait on to be called. Keep yourself on mute until you have been called upon. And we will do a first round of questions. And then after everyone has had a chance to speak, we may open up to additional questions if time permits. If you have a follow-up to someone else's question, please write that question in the chat and wait to be called upon. And the chat icon is in the lower left screen. Actually, in my screen, it's in the middle of the toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom window. Next slide, please. So the exact dates of the California challenge process, the challenge process for California, are still to be determined. We encourage you to sign up to receive email updates regarding the challenge process in the BEAD program. There are a number of other resources that are available in addition to these office hours. For tech support on the challenge portal itself, please contact ready.net at the address provided. For the other general questions about the BEAD program in California, email bead@cpuc.ca.gov. There's also the CPUC's BEAD page. We have a specific page on the challenge process, and we will be posting frequently asked questions today and updating those regularly. Next slide, please. So now it's time for questions and answers. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and then we will call upon you. I'm going to wait just a few minutes to see if there's any other questions, and then I will start going through the answers. Okay, so we'll go with our first question, which is from Davis Park. And let me turn on your video. Actually, I'm going to ask Sam if you could turn on Davis Park's video, please.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for hosting this. Davis Park from LA Digital Equity Action League. And I actually sent an email about this already, but I just wanted to see if I can get the answer to my question, whether or not access to the portal is now open for those who have registered and been approved to access that portal.
Yes, hi. Hi, yes, so we've not made access available to the portal yet. We do have a pre-registration process, and I'm glad to hear that you have engaged in the pre-registration process. We'll be providing access to the portal closer to the start of the challenge process. I'm not seeing any other questions in our, here we go. So next person is a question from Ben Hewlett. What features of the broadband map is going to be published for challengers? This will impact the challenge load. If we could allow Ben to have access to the video. And I can start off answering the question, but we'll also turn it over to Phil for supplemental information. So we plan using the most recent version, which is version 4 of the fabric, which is being released from the FCC, has been released by the FCC, and then NTIA provides the actual availability information, and we're still waiting for that. So once we have that information, we will make sure that that is what our challenge map is going to be based upon.
Jonathan, I don't have anything else to add. That is correct.
Thank you. Our next question is from Davis Park. And this question is, once the CPUC portal is open for use, will we still only have 5 days before the challenge formally starts? So, and Phil, you can jump in on this one as well. My remembrance of the rules is that we need to post the challenge map 7 days before the challenge process actually opens. And that is what we plan on doing at this point in time. Whether we open the portal for use before or not, we're still working on some technical issues related to that.
And Jonathan, just to add to that, a challenger can register in the portal at any time.
Yes. Our next question is from Ben Hewlett. Will include the latest BDC filings submitted March 1st, 2024. We will be using version 4 of the fabric.
What is the date of that version 4 again?
I believe that what I saw when I went to the FCC's broadband map was it said May 17th, but I know that they have been issuing updates to it. So I'm sorry, I can't provide an exact answer to that question, but we'll answer that in our FAQs.
So you're saying up to May 17th, 2024, all data submitted by that date should be reflected in the National Broadband Map?
I am not saying that. I do not know how the data submission and part works with the National Broadband Map, but we will answer that question in our FAQ.
Thank you.
Unless Phil, do you know the answer to that question?
There's typically a lag between when the fabric is released and when the availability data is available. And I think, as Jonathan rightly mentioned, we'll post in the FAQ exactly when this availability data is available and will be posted.
Then our next question is from Davis Park, and he is asking when approximately we will be opening the portal to registered users, and we have not established a date yet. We encourage you to check our website and sign up for email updates. We will be letting users of the challenge portal, we will make them aware in advance of when we're going to be opening it. Are there other questions? If you have other questions, please put them in the portal. I mean, in the chat box, sorry. We'll wait a minute to see if there's any others. Happy to wait, Ben. Thank you. And if you would just like to verbalize your question and not put it in the chat, that's fine too.
Is it appropriate to, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sorry.
Is it appropriate to ask questions about the the submittal process and amounts required for qualification, so forth, is that out of line today, or is that for later? I read somewhere that there was a minimum amount of I don't know why the word's escaping me now, of minimum participation by the applicant. In other words, 100% grant is not going to be available. There's going to be a minimum requirement on the word copay comes up.
Right.
What's
think
the
you're referring to
copay
the
for the
match.
prescription?
Right. I think I understand your question, Ben.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And I'm going to turn the question over to Amy, who can tell. So just a little bit of background. We submitted our initial proposal, volume 2, in December to the NTIA. We are still involved in the process of getting that approved by the NTIA. So we can attempt at this point to share what's available in the NOFO in terms of the match requirement, but that we won't know what the final rules for the program will be until after the NTIA has approved what's called our volume 2, our initial proposal volume 2, and the commission has also approved that. So the information we'll be able to share either now or through the FAQ if necessary will be based upon what's in the notice of funding opportunity issued by the NTIA. Amy or Phil, are you able to answer that question?
I'm going to defer to Amy on this one, but I think, Jonathan, all of the information that will be necessary to answer Ben's questions will be posted in the FAQ.
I can answer that question quickly just by noting that there is generally a 25% match requirement unless the census block group fits within a certain category, and that category is published on NTIA's website. But as Jonathan noted, more information will be available once NTIA has approved the California Initial Proposal Volume 2.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so it's a minimum match of 25% by census block group. Is that what you're saying?
No, there are some census block groups that a match is not required.
Okay.
NTIA keeps a list of those groups on its website. Otherwise, 25% of the total project costs is generally required as match. There are some exceptions to that as well, noted in the IPv2 or the initial proposal volume 2, with more details to come, obviously, from NTIA as well and the CPUC. Thank you.
And again, I've only read through the financial requirements once. I need to reread it. I apologize if I'm off base on this, but I recall that there were minimum speeds and maximum prices either requested or encouraged through points award. For example, I can't remember the speed requirements, but they were on the order of 100 by 20 or something for a maximum of $50 or some amount like that. I apologize if I'm inaccurate. My comment to that is, well, first of all, are those requirements for grant funding or simply just add points to increase chances in the case of a competitive overlap?
So that's a multi-part question, and I think might not be best answered in this format.
Okay.
Want to submit the question to our BEAD inbox. There's a number of parts of encourage you to review our initial proposal volume 2, which is on our website, and there are we have a point scoring system in it that we've proposed, which has various points for how fast the offering is that the grantee is proposing to do. And then there are also points associated and requirements for programs for low income and other types of discounted programs that are available that grantees may choose to make available. Some are requirements, some are optional, and there's quite a bit to all that. And so it might be clearest for you to read it in our initial proposal, but any specific questions you have, if you can submit them to bead@cpuc.ca.gov, we'd be happy to answer those questions through our FAQ. But there's quite a bit involved in that, and the purpose of today's office hour is primarily to address questions about the challenge process.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Is it likely that the ultimate challenged map that results from this process is going to be the criteria for other programs as well that may have preceded the challenge process? For example, FFA and CASF, are they then going to wait for the challenge map to be finalized and then use that as the basis of where funding is needed and not?
So each program, the California Advanced Services Fund and the federal funding account, have their own set of program rules which establish which locations are eligible for funding. And they're being run, those eligibility and location determinations are done irrespective of what's happening in the BEAD Challenge program. Just like the BEAD program has its own way of determining which locations are eligible for funding. Some locations may be eligible for funding in multiple programs, and some may only be eligible in one or the other programs. So the situation we have is we have 3 programs that are statutorily based with different eligibility requirements in them. And so while we coordinate the programs as much as possible, there is this inherent difference in terms of what locations are eligible. And it is possible that a location may be eligible for several programs at once.
Thank you.
Sure. If anyone else has any questions, if they could put them in the chat, please. If you're working on a question, if you can just send us a quick message to say you're working on a question, that would be great. Not seeing that there's any other questions, I think I will do one last call out before we start the wrap up for this office hour. I'm sorry, Ben, go ahead and ask your question, please, because I'm not quite sure I'm clear what you're asking about.
If a location service level changes, for example, increases before, well, after the challenge process, but before the NTIA final map is published, there's not going to be any influence of that location change on the final map. Is that correct? So, or is there a final check? I don't know. You got to cut it off somewhere. I realize that.
Bill, do you have an easy answer to what's a complicated question?
It is a complicated question, Ben, and thank you for asking. Could you just explain that one more time? And then I suspect that we're going to have to get back to you with an answer, and we'll post that in the FAQ as well. But I'd appreciate if you just repeat that.
The challenge process is going to be completed sometime this summer and submitted to NTIA. And then NTIA is going to approve those challenges into a final published broadband map, correct?
Correct.
And that's going to take probably about a year, correct?
It will take some time. I don't know exactly how long, but it will not be immediate, correct?
Right. Within that time, whatever it may be, year or whatever, if the service level at a location changes, is that going to affect the final award that NTIA would authorize at the time of funding under BEAD? In other words, let's say a whole group of locations now have 100 by 20 service, whereas at the completion of the submittal of the challenge process, they were unserved. Would that change be allowed, or would that be reflected in the funding authorization of NTIA once its final map is published?
So
That's a good question, Ben. That's a good question, Ben. And I don't think we can answer it in this session here. This is something outside of the challenge process. So if you would please provide the CPU office with an email with your question, we'll get that answered for you.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense, Jonathan?
yes, I think that would be best. That I think to share slightly more, NTI is still working on what state entities will have to do during the subgrantee selection process to potentially address that service levels will change during the 365 days that we're allowed to do subgrantee selection process. But that's, but we can provide a more full answer. But the short answer is I think that aware of the issue, do not know what the answer is yet.
Thank you.
I think we have some other question. Suli has a question. Will any upcoming office hours be dedicated specifically to technical assistance with the challenge portal?
Hi, Jonathan. Yeah, I just had a question. I know this is a series of different office hours. I see that there's going to be one on the 30th and then one on the 6th. Do we know if are those upcoming office hours going to be more general questions such as these ones, or I think it would be determined on when the actual challenge portal is open if any of those office hours can be specifically dedicated to any questions regarding it?
So I think that's something, Sully, that I could jump in. Hi, it's Laura Sasaki here. I think at least the two upcoming office hours were going to be kind of the general questions. For specific technical questions regarding the challenge portal, we would ask that you reach out to Ready. We, CPUC, we're not handling technical assistance on the portal itself, but ready.net is our partner in that process, and you can reach out directly to them. And I'll put that email in the chat for you. You're welcome.
Great. And our next question is from Davis Park. And the question is that they want to confirm that the data info submitted via the BEAD challenge or grant applications will not be used for or against consideration of other PUC pending funding applications. And we'll provide a more complete answer in our FAQs. I think that the answer is that if an application is submitted already, it's going to be using the criteria under which the application was submitted. That being said, I think it's a goal both of the California Public Utilities Commission and the BEAD program to not provide dual funding to a single location. So if a location is going to be receiving funding through another grant application, for instance, CSF, then FFA would not necessarily fund the same location too. We have a relatively limited amount of pot of money, and we're trying to connect as many unserved and underserved locations as possible. Any other questions? If you could put them in the chat, please. Of course, Davis, we're happy to wait.
Sorry, I'm gonna try to type it here in the chat.
Sure.
But maybe I can just try to articulate here. So if an applicant has already submitted a proposal for FFA funding, for example, which many people are still waiting to hear about. And a BEAD funding application is submitted, but that requires the FFA funding in order for the project get built, so that the BEAD funding project can get built. Will that be taken into consideration? In other words, it's not really double dipping. If they were meant to supplement each other's overall project vision.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the clarification. That's, yes, a different question. I think that's one that we will need to take back and answer in our FAQ. We don't have an immediate answer now.
And Davis, in the meantime, if you can type that into the chat so we can capture it accurately, because it is a bit of a nuanced question, then we can have those discussions and then post it on the FAQ.
Last call for questions. You can just let us know if you're working on it in the chat, please. So I have a question from Suli asking if we'll be hosting any additional informational briefings about the BEAD challenge process once the timeline is finalized.
Yeah, I was gonna I know there was one, just more like an overview briefing, I think like 2 weeks ago. But I know you said regarding like the timeline and the finalization of all the dates. Would there be any kind of additional follow-up, especially any more broad briefings of like the portal or kind of what next steps now that things are moving forward in the process?
I'll turn that question over to my colleague, Laura.
Hi, Sully. Thank you for the question. It's something that we are considering. It's not something I'm able to commit to at this point, but I think hearing from folks in terms of what would be helpful and what they will need. I will let you know. I don't know if you were able to make it to the webinar earlier this week, but we will be releasing a toolkit specifically for entities who are wanting to work with individual residents, but as a part of that, a series of videos that also helps people kind of walk through the portal and the process for submitting challenges and stuff like that. And so those will be available. We're just working on getting those resources posted as well. So I think it's kind of a twofold answer. One, I'll need to get back to you, and the other is that we will be posting resources as well.
The next question we have is from Davis Park and says, would a pending FFA funding application preclude a BEAD proposal, even if those applications are meant to complement each other? I think.
Oh, thank you, Davis. That's the clarification. Yeah.
Right, I was going to say, I think that's the clarification you were seeking. It's not an additional question. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We will be hosting 2 more office hours, so there'll be additional opportunities. So I think with that, just want to provide a few reminders to folks. So next slide, please. So we have some upcoming events. We have webinars and office hours. As I mentioned, we have 2 more office hours, May 30th and June 6th from 10 to 11. And we also will be having an additional webinar, at least 1 more webinar, and the next one would be about the challenge process for broadband service providers, really geared toward the submittal of rebuttals. encourage everyone to check our BEAD events page and to sign up for emails so you can receive all the notice of future public events that we'll be having, and also updates to the timeline and other important notifications about the challenge process. Thank you. We appreciate your attendance and questions and hope to see you at the future webinars. If there are specific topics that you would like to see at future office hours, please feel free to send us an email at bead@cpuc.ca.gov. We're happy to change the format of the office hours to make sure we're getting to questions that people have. With that, I thank everyone and have a great day.